All right, in this video, we're going to calculate inflation using the CPI method. You'll notice that I've already done part A, where I calculate inflation using the GDP deflator method. If you skipped that video, you can check your answers here before we move on. And if you have questions, you can go back and watch the solutions to part A. All right, so for CPI, the difference between these two methods is that instead of using our GDP deflator as a price index, we're going to create a price index based on the basket of goods that we'll define in the problem. So I will always tell you what the basket of goods is that you should use. In real life, that's based on the consumer expenditure survey, but you don't need to get into all of that. So here we're going to use this basket of goods. Here's our consumption basket: 2 pizzas, 1 apple, and 3 carrots. Now, to create our price index, we just need to find the price of the basket in each year. How much money would it take to buy these products? Okay, we're just going to scroll here so we can see our prices on the same screen. And then we'll use that to calculate our price index. So we've got in 2011, right? I want to buy 2 pizzas, and each pizza costs $4. Plus, I want to buy 1 apple, which costs $1. Plus, I want to buy 3 carrots, which cost $1 each. And so the price of my basket in 2011 would be $12. In 2012, I've got the same quantities here, so I'm holding my quantities constant. I'm just changing my prices. 1 times $2 plus 3 times $1.25, and that would cost me, the same basket of goods now would cost me $17.75. And then finally in 2013, that same basket of goods is going to cost $19. Now, to calculate our consumer price index, what we're going to do is sort of similar to the GDP deflator. We'll take a ratio of prices in the current year to the base year and then multiply by 100. And in this case, that means price of the basket in the current year divided by the price in the base year times 100. I think that formula is on the previous page of your handout. So I know right in the base year, which again is going to be 2011, that's going to be equal to 100, right? So in 2011, right, my CPI would be 12 over 12 times 100. That's going to always be 100. Your price index will always be equal to 100 in the base year. In 2012, I've got 17.75 divided by 12 times 100. Which gives me 147.9. And then in 2013, we've got 19 over 12 times 100, which is 158.3. And I'm just rounding everything to 1 decimal place. Keep things simple. Okay. Good, so now we've got our price index. And again, this is going to be similar to your GDP deflator. It's different, right? You got different numbers, but it's going to be similar to your GDP deflator. We calculate the inflation rate by finding the percent change in the price index. So in this case, we're going to do new minus old over old using our CPI. So for 2011 to 2012, we've got 47.9% inflation rate. And again, that's always going to be equal to the difference between your CPI in each year, but that's only because your denominator in this case is 100. So you need to do the new minus old over old, because that's not going to be the case when we go from 2012 to 2013. And that's going to give me 7%. All right, so now you'll notice that my inflation rates calculated using the CPI method are different from my inflation rates calculated using the GDP deflator method. And that's because we've used two different price indexes to calculate these inflation rates. So we want to kind of compare and contrast and think about what are the differences between these two methods. Why is it that we prefer the CPI for most of our inflation numbers? So the CPI includes imports. That's probably the first most noticeable difference that you'll see when you're looking at these examples, right? We included carrots in our CPI calculation, but we did not include carrots in our GDP calculation. And so that's one of the big differences between CPI and GDP, and that's going to affect your inflation numbers. Again, we're mostly looking at CPI when we have questions about what are the prices that consumers face. Like when I go about my day-to-day life and I buy what it is I need to buy, how are prices changing for me as a consumer? So CPI here, more specifically, is based on what's being consumed, okay? Whereas GDP is based on what's being produced. I'll just move this out of the way here. Move this over here. Okay. So CPI is based on consumption, whereas GDP is based on production. And this is really just a question of what is it are you trying to measure? Are you trying to measure prices for consumers? Are you trying to measure the price of everything we're producing, right? There's also a producer price index, which looks at all of the goods that producers need in order to operate in the US, right? There's lots and lots of different price indexes. Each of those price indexes could be used to calculate inflation. The one you want to use depends on the question that you're trying to answer. Although in this class, I'll tell you which one to use. All right, and then the last thing here is that the GDP quantities, you'll notice that the GDP quantities, they change year to year. Whereas the CPI, the basket, is fixed. Okay, you'll notice, right, when we calculate our CPI, okay, in every year I'm using the same quantities: 2 pizzas, 1 apple, 3 carrots. In our GDP calculation, every year I weight the prices of every good a little bit differently based on changes in what's actually being produced. So CPI kind of by holding constant those quantities, we get a more like pure measure of changes in prices. All right, good. So that's it for calculating inflation. In the next video, we're going to see how we can use CPI to compare the changes in the real value of goods over time.